Kia ora, everyone. Welcome, a very warm welcome to CIBSE's Young Engineers Awards panel discussion for 2021. Thank you for tuning in from across Australia and New Zealand as we hear from some of the finalists from last year's edition of the awards. I'm Pratik Alkesh, Chair of CIBSE New South Wales Young Engineers Network, and I'll be a moderator for this event. And I will also share my screen. Okay. All right, so I hope everyone can see my screen now with the presentation.
Not yet, I think.
Okay, I'll try again. How about now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So yes, as we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands from where we gather today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'm dialing in today from sunny Sydney and acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Joining me on our panel today, this evening, are four of my very brilliant peers as they give us an insight into their experiences in the building services industry. We'll also hear their views on this year's awards question topics and gain from the valuable advice they'll have to provide on putting together our submissions. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce BIPIN Thomas from 2PIR Consulting in Auckland, New Zealand, CLAUDIA BURBIDGE from Norman Disney Young in Sydney, Australia, CARO MAYOL from Transgrid in Sydney, and Jeff Sang from Stantec in Sydney as well. They were all finalists at the 2020 CIBSE Young Engineers Awards, so it made perfect sense to have them here for the event. All right, enough of me now. Let's hear straight from them. So BIPIN, why don't you start us off?
Yep. So I'm a recent graduate from WellTech. I specialized in building services after my bachelor's in mechanical engineering. After that, during that period, I found employment at 2PIR. We are basically a building services multidisciplinary consultancy based in Auckland. We are involved in all sorts of projects from warehouses, offices, hotels, residential, all the stuff. And some of the cool projects that I have been part of recently was a passive house project and a 21-story hotel project, which is ongoing at the moment. And yeah, and what drives me and what keeps me going every day is the fact that we are part of the solution by building healthier homes, healthier offices for people. So that's where people spend most of their lives at. So it totally makes sense to have good indoor air quality and better thermal comfort within those spaces. So that's what keeps me going. And that's me. Thanks.
Thanks, BIPIN. Wonderful to have you here from across the ditch. Yeah, so that's fantastic. Next up, we've got CLAUDIA.
Hi everyone. Yeah, my name is CLAUDIA. I'm an engineer in the sustainability team at Norman Disney and Young. I studied a Bachelor of Civil and Environmental Engineering at UNSW. And then while I was still studying, I started in a casual position here at NDY, which then turned into a graduate role and then moving into project engineer. So I've been with the company for 4 years now. In our sustainability team, we do everything. We do sustainability frameworks. So you probably would have heard of Green Star or WELL or Neighbours or NCC Section J. We also do a lot of energy modelling, thermal comfort modelling. We also do a bit more broader work in the advisory or strategic space. So businesses come to us or projects come to us and say, we want to be carbon neutral. We don't know what it means or how to get there. Can you help us? So yeah, that's a bit about the work that we do. A cool project that we're working on at the moment is actually an internal project. So NDY has been embarking on a journey of discovery, looking at our social risks in the supply chain. And this is something that's come out from a piece of legislation that came into play in Australia back in 2018 called the Modern Slavery Act. And this effectively asks businesses to look into their supply chain. So anything that they procure, any good or service, and perform an analysis on the risks from a modern slavery point of view, because incredibly enough, there are still modern slaves in our world today. So yeah, that's been pretty front of mind at the moment, and we've been engaging a lot with our suppliers. So that could be someone that we rent office space from. It could be other engineers that we work with, right down to caterers. So yeah, we're looking at what are the risks there. And I think this is something that's really cool and refreshing and important because ethically it's very important, but also it speaks to the broader ESG reporting. So that's environmental social governance reporting that a lot of businesses are looking to do more of. And we see that happening right across Australia, but it's really important in the building services space. So yeah, anything to build transparency and take responsibility for our actions is really important. So yeah, that's enough about me.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Claudia. That's a very good example of how engineers are working on so many different things, which are probably not what you would expect or what you would think would have a lot of technical significance, but clearly it does. So yeah, that's amazing. Really, really nice to have you here. Next we have CARO.
Hello?
Hey, yes.
Okay. So yes, I'm CARO. As you can see there, I'm currently the grid connections specialist at Transgrid, but I did apply to this Young Engineer of the Year award in Oregon, back in Oregon when I was an electrical engineer there. I used to work a lot in data centers, in the data center space. I worked for almost 3 years there, just designing data centers. And what I feel passionate about is how the electricity sector and the energy system works. What I want is to have an energy system with a high penetration of renewables. But of course, that brings issues to the network. And what I've been trying to do in buildings and now at Transgrid, obviously, is to try to incorporate renewables with a high availability of the system, because having a power system going is not only about charging our computers or our phones, it's also about having hospitals running, is people who are in need of that electricity. So that's what I feel passionate about. And that's why I'm in Transgrid now as well. Working in solar farms and wind farms and all over New South Wales. So yeah, that's me.
Fantastic, wonderful, nice to have you here as well. And yeah, that's a very burning topic these days, renewable energy. So I know we will be touching upon that later today. Wonderful. And finally, we have Jeff. If my slide will change, there we go.
Cool.
Jeff.
Hi everyone, my name is Jeff Sen. I'm a graduate mechanical engineer at Stantec. I'm a mechanical engineering graduate at UNSW back in 2019. I started my internship in 2019 with Stantec, And after I finished my internship, I just went on working there. And our mechanical team work on many cool projects. They work on data centers, hospitals, residential, commercial, and a lot of mixed-use projects. I've been in the CIBSE Young Engineers Network for about 2 years as a committee member, working alongside with Pratik. And I'm very passionate about researching and learning all the new building technology and how to apply into our design practice. And I was lucky, speaking of the Young Engineers Award, I was lucky enough to be the finalist for both the Student Award of the Year in 2019 and the Graduate Award of the Year back in 2020, which is last year. And just a bit about my video submission last year, I was mainly talking about the modular construction and how it would be it would be utilized to help our typical traditional construction style, because for traditional construction site, you will have a lot of unnecessary waste generated, and also it's not that efficient. So by having all the building construction offsite, you can actually control the quality of the building components, and you can reduce the project timeline, and you can also improve the safety of the workers as well. So that was my topic for last year. And I would just like to share with you one of my projects I worked on recently. I found it interesting. It was a commercial fit out project at Milson Points. That project was really challenging because our company was involved in the base building design before, and then a lot of things have been changed after the tender issue. And because the contractor took over our drawings, they made a lot of changes without informing us. And then when we were engaged back to the fit out project, we found a lot of challenges. So one challenge was the power issue on site. We were already designing everything to the maximum limit at the time. And at the time of conceptual design and the tender issue, the plan was to have a mixed use of retail tenancies and food and beverages tenancies on ground floor. But then when we were doing the fit out, it has become a huge food and beverages tenancy. And then because of the increased people load, we had to put in more mechanical equipment there. So mechanically and electrically, we encounter a lot of challenges. So the way we solved this problem was to utilize a gas-fired VRF system, and we also did some engineering solution for the kitchen exhaust, which yeah, I think I learned so much from this project. Yeah, that's about me. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jeff. It's a good example of how things often don't go to plan, but we still have to make do with what we have and come out with a good solution that works. So fantastic. Thanks, Jeff, for your introduction. And in my hurry, I forgot to add a slide about myself. So I'll just go extempore. But I'm Pratik Alkesh. I am a mechanical engineer and design manager at AECOM in Sydney. I primarily work on data center and modular construction projects. And I'm quite interested in how data centers are increasingly becoming a fabric of our urban built environment, but also what challenges and opportunities they bring from a public planning, from a introduction of technology, and from a smart cities perspective. It's very interesting. I almost compare them to how electricity substations used to be possibly 100 years ago, when alternating current was first being supplied to houses all around the world. We still found ways to incorporate them in the fabric of our society, in the fabric of our built environment, in our cities, in our towns. And I think, and I truly believe that in the next 10 years, data centers, small, big, massive, whatever size they come in, they'll be and they'll play an increased role in how our society operates. So yeah, that's what I'm interested in, and I'm very glad to be here and to be catching up with some of my peers, and to be introducing CIBSE Young Engineers Awards for 2021. All right, so I think going in next, we'll have a general discussion about, how our built environment is changing and has changed over the past few years. Obviously, COVID-19 is a topic that's been done to death in many a webinar, but it is still very valid, and it has changed things possibly forever. I mean, for example, I was talking to Claudia earlier, and she said that in commercial buildings, developers are looking for more flexibility in their new builds. What kind of flexibility did you see developers asking for?
Yeah, something that we've seen on a couple of projects is that developers are asking the design team to design a certain aspect, perhaps more stricter requirements, like as an example, in terms of design occupancy, the mechanical team were asked to design the systems to achieve 1 person per 6 meters squared. So that's a lot of people squashed in. And the intention there was that they were sort of thinking, oh, well, in the future, maybe the space might be used as a call center. But then COVID-19 happened, and suddenly the requirements or tenants were asking for spaces that allowed for a much roomier workplace. So in that case, the mechanical systems stayed at a design occupancy of 1 per 6, but the I guess the expectation was that the floors may only be filled to 1 person per 12 meters squared. So that's allowing for, a lot more space between you and the person next to you. People would feel a lot more comfortable in terms of cleanliness and passage of air and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's something interesting that we're seeing coming out of a couple of buildings that we're working on.
Oh, very interesting. That actually reminds me, like, people, when you said people squashed in, it reminded me of what happened in a couple of days ago, actually, with the floods in Sydney. So I'm not aware if people read the news, but there was a 1 in 100-year flood event in Western Sydney, which rendered a lot of places inland under many meters of water. And it reminded me that we are starting to see adverse events at an increased frequency, and possibly having a much larger impact than they used to previously, which is something that we should be more aware of, I think. I was talking to someone in our office earlier about resilience in our public spaces, and we might have a case where we need public buildings such as libraries or town halls or even metro stations to be able to cater mechanically, electrically, hydraulically, to be able to cater to an increased occupancy level, so that these spaces can be used as evacuation zones, or possibly, like, if there's another pandemic, God forbid, those can be used as quarantine centers or flood evacuation zones and so on. Yeah, so that's very interesting, and I'm sure, like, that obviously incorporating more resilient and flexible buildings takes a toll on the efficiency of a building, right? Like, in terms of, you obviously have to oversize a few things, and you have to account for a lot more than what what it's normally going to be used for. So what is a good way to incorporate all of those elements?
Yeah, it's such a fine balance. Like, on a particular project, we had those desires of the client, and then we also had desires to achieve super high neighbours energy rating. There was also really high ambitions for Green Star, which relied on a lot of high energy performance. So yeah, there's all these balances within a building that like we can certainly do a lot of modelling and a lot of I guess testing of all these certain situations that may play out. But really, the greatest test will be how it really operates and the kind of tenants that you're getting into the space and how they're going to use the space. Yeah, so it'll be a really interesting time ahead.
For sure, for sure. Well, we know that your office is very efficient, so we'll give you a chance to switch the lights back on. But say, BIPIN, how's it in your project? Like you said, you were designing a 21-floor hotel. People aren't really traveling these days, but how is the business case still coming along, or have you had to make any changes because of what's happened in the last year?
Yeah, just like Claudia was saying, the occupant density is certainly going down. We were building, I mean, a few months back, one of the office buildings which we were designing had crazy occupant density, like that was say like 6 square meters per person, 6 or 5, something like that. But this hotel project, they're not allowing for densely populated conference rooms and restaurants. So they are actually reducing the occupancies, but improving indoor air quality, all those stuff. They have actually placed quite stringent requirements. I think, I'm not sure if that's due to the pandemic or not, but the requirements are quite higher than what we usually do in New Zealand or Australia. So yeah, that's an exciting project because that's something that we are not used to designing, that high quality, I mean, high, what you call it? For instance, indoor air quality requirements are pretty high for that project. So yeah, that's quite exciting. And I'm not sure what their business model is. I don't know. So they would probably have, they're pretty hopeful that more people would start coming in after the vaccine stuff. I'm pretty optimistic about that too. I don't think everyone wants to be stuck at where they are now. People want to travel. So I'm pretty hopeful that things would get back to normal. So yeah.
Yeah, so are we. I love traveling. I've been to Auckland once. It's a lovely city. So yeah, let's hope at least the travel bubble opens up and we can get traveling and seeing each other more often.
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, how about you, Jeff? Any project? Have any of your projects been impacted? You talked about commercial buildings as well earlier, but what about in the residential sector? Have you had any thoughts on that?
Yeah, for our company, we see a lot of clients coming back to us to like assess and audit like their ventilation systems, both residential and commercial as well. Yeah, you're right that the occupancy level has really shifted from the commercial to residential because of the work from home arrangement. We'll expect that people will ask for more flexibility about their living space because some people complain about their work-life balance. And we will just need more space for them to chill out outdoor. And architecturally, in the future, if the architect can incorporate elements where you can just switch on the button and you can convert the space from bedroom to office, it will be interesting. So we'll see a new form of home offices happening in the future and enhance ventilation requirements for the residential building as well because of high occupancy. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. I mean, personally as well, I like to be able to have that flexibility, but if going by what we see in newly built houses and units, the bedrooms tend to be quite small, and obviously Sydney real estate so expensive, they might have to start thinking about alternative ways to enable people to work from home. So which definitely will have an impact on how residential spaces are designed as well, and possibly even commercial spaces. There might be a case for a lot of companies who have now said that they'll allow all their employees to work from wherever, right? Not just home. It can be overseas, you can be on holiday, you can be in Bali, chilling out. How do you what do you do with all that office space then? Maybe you'll have more collaboration zones, or more fun areas in your office to get people excited about coming back in, because it's far too convenient staying at home. But there are some benefits, in my opinion. There are some benefits to still coming in and seeing your colleagues face to face, interacting with them, building those connections and those soft bonds. So it'll be interesting. Would you say, Jeff, that COVID has kind of changed things forever, or do you think we'll go back in a few years to what it was pre-COVID?
I think yes, definitely changed the way we live and work. In terms of like future after we come out from this pandemic, I think we already got the option for working at home. So I feel like in the future, commercial buildings, they really expect less occupancy, and how they adjust their mechanical system to respond to the lower occupancy is pretty interesting as well. Because when you have less occupancy, it doesn't mean that your mechanical system will run more efficiently, because there's a minimum turn down for all sort of equipment. For example, the water cool system. So it will be interesting how you can implement more control and make the building smarter, so that you can actually save the energy in response to this like pandemic. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. That's wonderful. Thanks, Jeff. Really great insights. Well, so that makes me like something just clicked in my mind, and this connects to what CARO was saying earlier about renewable energy. With our world or our working culture and life so nebulous looking in the future, how do you reckon renewable or energy demand peaks and troughs will look going forward? Because normally you know that people turn the lights on at 7 p.m. and they'll turn the lights on at home, but maybe they'll be switching off in the office. But if everyone's working from home, then you'll maybe have a different pattern. I don't know what the pattern will be. And how does the grid cope with that, especially with so many distributed sources of electricity generation these days? You have like solar panels, you have wind turbines, you have hydroelectric, all this power being generated in different places. What do you think the challenges are, and where do you start with addressing this problem?
Well, I'll start with saying yes, of course, this changes things in a sense that when we designed buildings, like when I used to design buildings, we would consider a certain maximum demand. But now that maximum demand is no longer valid, really, because now people are working from home. There's a lot of equipment that we didn't consider in our last maximum demand calculations, and that may cause some differences in the network within the buildings. But then going to the other side of things, the distributed energy resources, or DER. So those resources are a bit complicated on the network for various reasons. The main reason is that our power system was made to have big generation, then long transmission systems, then a substation to distribute the generation within a city. And the distributor of that electricity would control voltage, power factor, etc. So the quality of our electricity would be of a certain standard because they controlled it. But now when you incorporate distributed energy resources, so you have solar panels, you're basically a generator now, and you're no longer just a consumer of electricity. That not only means that you may be consuming less electricity from the grid, but it also means that you're affecting the grid. You're changing the voltage, you're changing the power factor, you're changing the quality of the resource. So what do you do about that? What happens in the larger grid is that the big generators have certain standards to be connected, have certain standards to comply with, to be connected to the grid. And the power system operator would ask for them to comply to those standards. But because we're in buildings and the generation here is not as large, they don't really care because like, oh, it's not relevant. But the thing is that if every single person starts installing this energy resources in their homes, it becomes relevant. One thing that is good about the changes with COVID is that now people are staying at home when the sun is shining. So it's different to what it was before, in which they would just generate to the system, and that would cause more problems than now that people are staying home and are actually using that electricity right now. So that's a plus. And the other thing is that I think people are starting to understand how we are affecting the power system as a whole, because we're starting to see problems. Unfortunately, we had to wait to start to see problems in the power system to do something about it. But at least I've seen that now the distributors are doing something about it and are thinking about the operational challenges of having good quality of electricity now with this distributed generation.
I see. Yeah, very interesting. So you're saying that because people have started working from home more often, it's actually better when you start to think about all the distributed energy and how that plays into the grid.
Yeah. So because there's two things. So the quality of electricity, so you affect power factor, voltage, etc. But there's also the something that we didn't consider before, that now there's a lot more power going through these poles and wires that we didn't allow for when we first designed them. They were designed a long time ago when this wasn't even a thing. And now that it is a thing, we're using all that infrastructure that wasn't really made for that. So we may, for example, not be able to generate to the system because like the system can't handle it. So the good thing about staying home and starting using that electricity is precisely that you're not using those poles and wires, you're using it like in a microgrid kind of situation, but we still have those challenges in the grid.
Right. Yeah, I understand. And of course, like with storing that energy, it's still a challenge, right? Battery technology hasn't evolved at the same pace. And it's easier if you just use that energy as it's being generated rather than have it stored and use it later on. That's obviously a bigger challenge.
And it's costly as well. I think the cost is the main thing for developers. When they do a residential building, they're trying to minimize the cost, and adding batteries would, well, increase the cost considerably.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even solar panels are not very they're very costly. Like not everyone has them on the roofs of their houses. Very few people have them. And yeah, so we're not quite there yet, but we are getting there. So it looks good. And it's very, very promising. But I do remember reading somewhere about batteries and how some of the raw materials that are used to make batteries are sourced in Africa in very questionable conditions. Does that have an effect on the Modern Slavery Act that Claudia, you were mentioning earlier? Is that something you consider or you've looked into?
Yeah, it would have an impact for sure. I mean, that's something that where businesses all across Australia are looking into as part of their supply chains. Where do we procure stuff from? Does it all come from Australia, or does it come from India, China? What is the supply chain? And I think the challenge is, the biggest challenge that businesses are facing is that you have a visual of the money that you directly to give to someone that you procure a good or service from, but then the nature of the supply chain is that that person then engages services from an infinite number of people and those people. So the further down the rabbit hole you go, yeah, the more interesting and potentially, yeah, it can show you some sort of, yeah, just an awareness of the supply chain that you didn't have before, the scope, the location of all these risks, and businesses now are looking. I'm sure they're looking internally and thinking, okay, so do we walk away from someone who's potentially too high a risk because we know that they procure from Africa or somewhere, or do we try and engage with that business so that collectively we can try and reduce the risk? Yeah, so it's a really interesting space.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I was going to ask next. Like, so if you find a present down the rabbit hole, do you tell the client, advise the clients on how to return the present or get away from it, or do you give alternative options that they could consider? How does it work? It's very interesting.
It would depend. Like I guess if it's a one-off purchase, and if the risk is high enough, it depends on the client's appetite for risk. Do they want absolutely zero risk? Then if the risk is high enough, then potentially you would walk away and say, no, I don't want anything to do with that. But perhaps if this person or organization is supplying something that is perhaps the contract is so ongoing, or there are multiple contracts involved, then yeah, if the client is interested, then of course we'd give them options of to reduce their risk in that sense.
Okay, fair enough. That's very interesting. Might have to see whether my company does any of that, and see if I can get involved. Very interesting. Thanks everyone. I think that was a great discussion, and I liked how we touched upon so many different topics that are very relevant to this year's question. So for all the audience members who are listening and who are potentially going to submit their applications for this year's awards, this year's awards question is about preparing for the unknown. And these are some of the unknowns that we've seen in the recent past, and we will continue to feel the impacts of these unknowns in how we design our spaces that we live in, that we operate in, that we work in. And yeah, I liked how every one of us had a slightly different viewpoint of where we were seeing the industry from and what our personal experiences were. And I'm sure some of the audience members have got ideas on their submission from this discussion. So that's brilliant. That was what we were aiming for. But going to the awards, you all were finalists last year. BIPIN, you won the Student of the Year award last year. How has the recognition impacted your career, your personal confidence? Like how has it been, and what has your feeling been in the last year or so?
So yeah, I won the award, and to be honest, I wasn't really prepared to make a submission myself. That was a decision which I made like probably half an hour before I actually decided what to do, what to submit. And yeah, so, but that actually changed a lot for me. Winning that thing or even being a finalist has actually added value to me as an individual. It gave me some sort of confidence to stand in front of people, to share my ideas about stuff. And apart from that, apart from winning this award, I was recognized for winning this award at the New Zealand Green Building Council, which was pretty cool because that actually exposed me to the local market here as well. And yeah, I actually got few job opportunities as well, but unfortunately I couldn't take any of those because I was I was employed before that. And yeah, which is pretty good actually. I would suggest anyone who's on that brink to go for it. You wouldn't regret this decision. This would be a good start for your career.
Yeah, thanks, BIPIN. What are any tips you have for our prospective applicants about applying? You know, with their video submission or with their written submissions. Would you say 1 or 2 tips that would really benefit them?
Yeah, I would say what helped me was I read quite a bit. Like I like reading about industry related stuff. Like people might think I'm crazy, but I read like at least 1 article or so every week, which keeps adding value to me. So that actually helped me in preparing for my submission, although that was a last minute decision because I had all those things going on in my mind. I could actually convert that into an entry. So I would suggest people to read, watch industry related stuff. It would actually shape your mind so that you would be prepared for, I mean, you could, this is not really hard. You could actually do it if you put your effort towards it for at least a day or so. But what matters is how well prepared you are as an engineer in the long run. So that doesn't happen overnight. You should be preparing yourself for that throughout this period, at least until the award entry is done.
Well, I hope people keep doing that after the award as well. But thanks, BIPIN. We're really glad to have you here. And I mean, so far it does help if you have been reading, and it keeps you abreast with what's happening in the industry, and with things changing so quickly, with so many new technologies being adopted, with a lot of unseen impact of renewable energy and differing supply chains and different ways of procurement and so on. It definitely does help to be catching up on industry news. CIBSE itself has a few newsletters that people can sign up to. If you go to our website, cibse.org, there's sign-ups over there for different industry sectors as well, and different regions. So like we are in the ANZ region, the newsletter will be tailored to us. There's also a yen newsletter, I believe, so you can subscribe to that as well, and you will be informed of any technical events and CPD events that we'll be running. Yeah, we run one every so often, every month or so. So yeah, that will keep you abreast. Well, how about you, Jeff? You've been involved and you've applied for 2 years now successfully. How has that helped you?
So last year, I think the topic came out during the lockdown period, and I thought it was just a great thing to do, like at home. And doing the research on the topic was just an enjoyable process, because I also had the habit of reading technical journals. So it was like a test for me to put out whatever I know about the industry and actually reflect on all the projects I work on and how I elaborate on these and how we can make things better. And personally, I think the participation gave me further development on my presentation skills and also helped me really reflect on my project experience, as I mentioned earlier. And yeah, it really opened my door as well to connect with other building professionals, because when you get nominated, you will be invited to the event, the award presentation event, and then you can mingle with all the people within the whole the same industry, but they're doing different things. So it's just exciting to talk to those people. And yeah, that's from me.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And this year, hopefully, fingers crossed, we will have a live event, in-person event in Sydney, and all the finalists will be provided travel and accommodation to attend. From previous years, it's been a really well-attended event. There's a lot of people for networking opportunities from all different parts of industry, and it's like our flagship event of the year. So that's a great point. I'd actually forgotten about that because last year's one was virtual, but this year, fingers crossed, and I hope it'll go ahead. What about you, Caro? How was your experience applying, and what tips do you have?
Well, it was very interesting for me because I didn't know about it. Someone in Oracle in my organization told me about it, because I had been talking a lot about how data centers could actually allow more renewable energy to be incorporated in a power system. And I would talk a lot about that. So some senior engineer came to me one day and said, "Hey, so there is this CIBSE Awards, and your interests really are very could apply for this award." And I was like, okay, sure, let's do that. One tip that I could give people is that I got a lot of help from senior engineers in Oracle, and also the marketing and media team. And they helped me a lot because I couldn't do a video myself. I couldn't do it. I don't know about you guys, but I felt that it was a bit strange. I didn't know what to say, how to say it. And then, yeah, the marketing team helped me with that, which was really good. What else? And well, I would say just focus on something you really like. I do agree with all of you guys saying read a lot, because in general, the industry moves so fast that we need to stay focused on what's happening, what's new, what is going to happen, what are the new, like now with COVID, the changes will be massive. Commercial buildings will completely change. Like now, as Pratik said, there will be a lot more collaboration spaces, more than the office or the plan, like only an office, more collaboration spaces, more meeting places. And in the residential buildings will change as well. Like I'm now in my apartment, in my 2-bedroom apartment, using my living room basically. So I think that would definitely change things, and that changes the way we design, and that may change in the future the standards we've been using. So yeah, I know, think about those things, read, and yeah, enjoy.
Very wonderfully put. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not just what we have done and where we have come, but also thinking ahead, how things will change, and possibly trying to ideate what might happen and how we should try and be a step ahead as the built environment, or for the built environment, so that humanity or everyone who's interacting with it can benefit from it. Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. So before I go to Claudia, just quick one. Please feel free to send in any questions through the chat. We'll address them once we hear from Claudia. So yeah, Claudia, you were a finalist last year. How has that recognition helped you in your company, and what are any tips you have for our applicants?
Yeah, I think for me it was a really great opportunity both prior to submitting and then afterwards, to engage with senior engineers in my team, and as Cara said, the marketing team as well. So yeah, it was just, I really used that opportunity to sit them down with me and brainstorm not only what they thought the future looks like, but also how that aligned with what I thought it might look like. And I also used that opportunity. I guess it was clarifying to sort of understand how that aligns with my personal brand as I see it now. I think there was a lot of learning there, like updating your LinkedIn and making sure that the videos are all good. And so that was great. And then looking to see how I might use this to develop certain strengths within my own professional and personal brand, and how I might want to see that change in the future. So yeah, it was a great excuse to do all that. I think tips, start early. Don't be afraid to reach out to others in your team, more senior, to see what they think about the industry, pick their brain. And yeah, use the opportunity to the fullest.
Absolutely, very wonderfully put. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but actually, thumbs up if you agree that the process of actually putting the video together and brainstorming and coming up with the submission helped a lot more than actually becoming a finalist. I think that was the case for me. Like you said, Claudia, I got to speak to so many people in my organization, high, low, whatever on the ladder they are, but in different teams, because I was also talking about data centers from a sustainability point of view, from embodied carbon, embodied energy, and so on, which meant that I got to speak to someone in the facades team, or someone in the sustainability team, or someone in structures, to try and understand and piece together how our one box of a building actually interacts with the neighborhood, with the immediate surrounding, with the city, with the electricity grid, with the materials that are being brought in, like the supply chain, but also like how it impacts, how our industry impacts global, ecological factors, like those that affect climate change and global warming. So just the process and the research that I put into it really helped me explore more avenues and solidify my own interest. Like you say, like it was about a personal brand as well. Maybe previously I was only a mechanical engineer, but now I feel more confident saying that I have a better understanding of at least one sector. If it's just the data center sector, I have a better understanding of it, and I can talk about it at the pub or at a networking event or whatever, at a virtual drinks like we've been having a lot of. Yeah, so I've absolutely enjoyed it, and I'm sure you all have as well. We don't have any questions yet, so feel free. Am I seeing the right thing? Oh, I do see a question now. General CIBSE related question. What have you found to be the biggest benefit of being a CIBSE member as a young engineer? Okay, it's a very, very good question. So CIBSE membership for young engineers is, so there's a graduate membership that is around 100 British pounds, which is about 200 Australian dollars per year. The benefit of being a CIBSE member is that you get access to a lot of technical journals, you get access to a lot of technical standards as well, regarding a whole heap of topics, technical topics, mechanical, electrical, hydraulics, even fire protection and sustainability. So that's the biggest benefit of being a CIBSE member. Apart from that, you also get access to a lot of events that we run. So we run CPD events. So for those all who are also thinking of chartership, we do, obviously CIBSE is a chartership body as well. It's recognized in Australia, and you can have a back-to-back chartership with Engineers Australia as well if you go the CIBSE path. And CIBSE offers a lot of CPD related courses to get your chartership going. And finally, if you're a CIBSE member, sorry, as a student, it's even better because it's free. If you're a full-time student, it's free. If you're a part-time student, I think there's a small fee, but basically, if you can still see my screen, that is the sign up link if you're a student. And of course, you can screenshot the QR codes that I'm sharing on screen so that you can follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to us there. So thanks. Yes, very good question about being a CIBSE member. I think that was the only question we had so far. Let me see. I think I had one question from someone who couldn't make the webinar today. But this was more of a general question. Obviously, with working from home, we've had different challenges about how to interact with our colleagues and how to interact with our seniors. For a lot of us who are still young engineers, we still look up to our seniors for a lot of technical help, a lot of assistance. We're doing something new. Claudia, what are any tips you may give to someone who's a new grad potentially, or who's recently started in the industry about reaching out and succeeding in this era where we are all working at odd times and different places?
I think something that I used to my advantage, it really helped me, was that I demanded my manager's time. So I set up, well, obviously I asked their permission first, and I set up a regular time in their calendar each week that was dedicated to the two of us. And there was no plan. I could use it for whatever I wanted. Most of the time it was project based. So if it wasn't an urgent question, I would save it up and we'd use that half an hour to just go through the details together. Otherwise, we would talk about professional development. Sometimes they would tell me what's going on in the business, which is really interesting. That's not always a discussion that you would usually have with a peer. So yeah, using that time, it really helped to let me get stuff off my chest if I was working at home and there was no one else to talk to. But it also helped me to develop my awareness of the business, what it is to be an engineer, a consultant, how we interact with our clients, that kind of thing. Yeah, so I would recommend doing something like that.
Fantastic. Absolutely. I completely agree. It is important that we as young engineers and young professionals take the initiative of our own career progression. Don't be afraid, or we shouldn't be afraid to ask questions. We shouldn't be afraid to reach out. And like you did, you reached out to your manager and set a time and you said, right, this is what I need. Because had everyone been working in the office, you would have had half an hour every week interacting with them at the tea point or walking around or by their desk and whatnot, which you really miss at home. So yeah, that was wonderful. How about you, BIPIN?
Yeah, I have worked at home for like 2 weeks. That's the max I've been working from home. But I found it weird because at office, I could just shoulder tap and ask people, what's going on here? Please help me with this stuff. So that was easy and fast. But working from home, I actually found it hard for the first 2 days because I was concerned whether if I give my manager a call now, would I be disturbing him? Would I be affecting his workflow, all those stuff? But after 2 days, I was like, I can't be bothered with that. I'll just call him anyways. And then that became a routine for us. So we used to talk to each other like almost all the time. Like he was just a Teams chat away. That was helpful for me because I was just starting my career and I didn't know much about how things worked. So yeah, that was okay. I would say having a routine is helpful, like having a break at set time and knowing when to stop working. Like at times it just goes on forever. So knowing when to stop working for the day and probably going for a walk or something after that, having a routine helped me a lot, working from home. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an amazing perspective because you just started in the industry during COVID or while everyone was working from home. So yeah, that's very interesting. But yeah, I just wanted to say before we run out of time, which we have, we actually spoke about it at a CIBSE episode, like podcast episode that we recorded. You can find us on Spotify, and it's about how young professionals can excel and succeed while we do this hybrid work from home and work from office environment, where people have all different, times of working and priorities as well. Yeah, find us on Spotify, type CIBSE in the search box, and I think we're the first search hit, and it's the latest episode, which is recorded a couple months ago. It's a good, I'm on it, so yes, I will say it was a good one. But we have a few senior engineers who we speak to, and we ask them for advice on what they would say and what they have been telling their mentees and their reporting staff about how they should communicate and how they can excel. So yeah, if we don't have any more questions, I think we will call it a day. It has been wonderful catching up with everyone, and I'm sure we'll see you around more often. And thank you for everyone who could join. Before we cut the call, though, I would also like to thank few of my committee members who helped a lot. So Siwei Wang, Niro Sirwardena, and our CIBSE ANZ Business Development Manager, Sharon Pestonji, who's really helped to put this event together. And of course, our wonderful panelists, Claudia, BIPIN, Jeff, and CARO, for taking your time after hours to speak to some of the prospective applicants and to give us some tips and advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pratik.
Thanks for hosting.
Thank you, Pratik.
Yeah, please. Thanks again for joining, and good luck, everyone, with your submissions. We look forward to seeing them and receiving them. All right, have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.